In July 2000, residents and airplane spotters around Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport witnessed a horrifying view of the prestigious Concorde, attempting to climb after takeoff while trailing a huge streak of fire and smoke. The plane did not make it very far and crashed just moments after liftoff. Today, we are going to find out what happened and how the event eventually spelled the end of the prestigious airliner. Now let's get into it. Welcome to Airspace. The Concorde is an absolutely fascinating plane. I mean, look at it, it is basically an oversized fighter jet used for passenger transport. Amazingly, this sophisticated piece of technology was developed in the 60s, without computers or modern simulations. The project was a collaboration between France and Great Britain and was intended as a contender to the Boeing 747, which was at the time being developed in the United States. The Concorde, with its four massive jet engines that were originally intended for Great Britain's Vulcan strategic bomber, could achieve speeds of more than Mach 2, that is twice the speed of sound. With that, the Concorde was able to fly the London-New York route in just 3 hours and 30 minutes. Quite the feat, most other airliners take 7 to 8 hours for that. The passenger cabin could seat up to 120 passengers, and the flight deck was occupied by 2 pilots and a flight engineer. A trip on the plane was usually rather expensive and reserved for the richer clients. On July 25, 2000, the crew of the Concorde was getting ready for departure from Paris Charles de Gaulle Airport, headed for New York. The plane was fueled almost to the maximum capacity when it lined up and took off from runway 26 right. Shortly before the pilots performed the takeoff rotation, that is lifting the nose to get the plane airborne, they heard a loud bang from the left side and the plane started veering to the left. Just seconds later, they were informed that the plane was streaking a huge plume of fire and smoke, but the plane lifted off anyways. Observers took quite shocking photos and even a video showing the left wing of the Concorde ablaze. The plane attempted to climb, but seemed unable to do so and remained at a height of only just 200 feet before it started to descend. It crashed into a small hotel next to the airport just 46 seconds after liftoff, killing all 109 occupants and 4 people in the hotel immediately. The investigation soon began and found pieces of metal and rubber on the runway, as well as huge burn spots on the runway and adjacent grass. Let's go back to a point 5 minutes before the Concorde burst into flames. At that time, a Continental Airlines McDonnell Douglas DC-10 departed from runway 26 right. When it lifted off the ground, it dropped a small metal strip from one of the engines. This strip was 43 centimeters long and 3 centimeters wide and came from a thrust reverser door. At this time, the Concorde was getting ready for departure, its tanks filled almost to full capacity. At 14:42 and 31 seconds, the Concorde's commander commenced the takeoff with a slight tailwind. The 4 massive engines spooled up and the afterburners ignited. 23 seconds into the takeoff roll, the plane reached a speed of 100 knots. 32 seconds into the takeoff roll, the plane reached V1, that is the speed at which takeoff can no longer be aborted, since the remaining runway would be too short to come to a halt. That day, this speed was 150 knots. The plane would need to further accelerate to 198 knots to lift off. 38 seconds into the takeoff, the Concorde ran over the metal strip dropped by the DC-10 that took off 5 minutes before. As a result, one of the left main gear tires exploded and a 4.5 kilogram chunk of rubber was ejected at an estimated speed of 140 meters per second towards the wing of the plane. When it struck the wing, it did not punch a hole in it, but sent shockwaves through the fuel tank. With the tanks almost at full capacity, the shockwave had nowhere to go since fluids are not compressible. The tank then ruptured at its weakest link on the rear underside of the left wing. Another piece of rubber cut through several wires, among them also one of the wires used to control the landing gear. Fuel was now gushing from the broken tank in large quantities and ignited almost immediately, most likely due to sparks from the severed wires or from contact with the hot engines. 48 seconds into the takeoff, the captain lifted the plane's nose and the Concorde took off. At this time, the left-hand engine started to fail, most likely due to the ingestion of debris or hot gases. The plane was now flying already slower than its design speed and was barely able to climb. 1 minute and 5 seconds, the crew tries to raise the landing gear in a desperate attempt to lower the drag of the plane in order to be able to climb. However, this was impossible due to the broken wires and the gear stayed down. The airspeed started to decay more and more. The following 29 seconds are marked by fire alarms and the crew trying to keep the plane airborne. It started to roll to the left severely due to the asymmetric thrust and the disintegrating plane. As a last resort, the captain reduced power on the remaining engines to stop the roll. However, the crew lost control and crashed into a small hotel just 1 minute and 34 seconds after commencing takeoff. All in all, this accident was a clear demonstration of how small things can have a huge effect in aviation. The metallic strip on the runway was traced back to a Continental Airways DC-10, and its service history was examined. The investigators found out that the strip had been maintained poorly and not according to maintenance procedures on several occasions. Also, such a wing tank failure as it occurred in the case of the Concorde never happened before and has never repeated since. The investigation also determined that if the crew had decided to abort the takeoff after they hit the metal strip, the accident could not have been avoided, since they would not have had enough runway left to stop the aircraft. The plane would most likely have run over the runway end at a speed greater than 75 knots, that is 86 miles per hour or 140 kilometers per hour, which would most likely have resulted in a catastrophic event as well. After the investigation concluded, several recommendations were made. The wing tanks of the remaining Concordes were reinforced with Kevlar mats to make them more resistant to tire debris, and several other improvements were made. However, passenger demand started to dwindle after the crash. This may be due to the recession around the turn of the millennium, but also due to the increasing mistrust towards the plane from the passengers. Also, with increasing fuel prices, the fuel-hungry supersonic airliner became a money-losing burden for Air France and British Airways, so they simultaneously announced that they would retire the plane in 2003. The planes remain in good condition and are displayed in various locations around the world. I've had the chance to admire this beautiful plane on many occasions in London Heathrow during long afternoon queues for departure. It is displayed prominently next to runway 27 left. Thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe for weekly aviation coverage on airplane accidents, but also lighter topics such as aviation fun facts. See you in the next one.